Alright people, Algebra 1, here we go with graphing lines. By the end of the lesson you'll be able to do two types of graphing lines, one in standard form, one in slope-intercept form, and then we're also going to talk about two special cases which are horizontal and vertical lines. So we'll be able to graph pretty much every line after this lesson. So to start, we need to know what standard form looks like, and that is going to be ax plus by equals c. And when we do it in standard form, to graph it, we are going to find our intercepts, then graph. Okay, and when I say find intercepts, I mean we have two types of intercepts. We have x-intercepts, which are the places where we cross the x-axis, and y-intercepts, which are the places where we cross the y-axis. One thing to keep in mind for our x-intercepts, we always know that the y-coordinate is going to be 0, and vice versa for our x-intercept, the x-coordinate is going to be 0. So looking at our graph, we can also find our x and y-intercepts if we're given our graph. So this is a little bit backwards, but just to identify, I cross my x-axis right here and my y-axis right here. So my x-intercepts, I have an x value of -7 and a y, remember, is always 0. For my y-intercept, I'm down 3, so I'm going to be at -3. What am I doing there? I'm going to be at -3 for the y value, which means I need to have 0 for the x. 0, -3 is your y-intercept. Okay, in order to find our y-intercept, first thing, like I said, we always know y is 0, so we make that 0. Looking at my example, if I make this 0, I'm going to have 2 times 0, which is just 0, and so this piece cancels out. After we've done that, we're going to solve for x. So I have an equation, 4x equals 12. To solve this, I divide both sides by 4, and I get that x is 0, which means my x-intercept is at 3, 0. Conversely, then, we can talk about finding our y-intercept, which starts the opposite direction. We're going to start with making x equals 0. Looking at my example, if x is 0, I'm going to have 4 times 0, which is just 0, or in other words, that disappears. And after we've made x 0, we're going to solve for y. So to do that, I need to divide by -2, which gives me a -6, which means my coordinate is 0, -6. Now putting those two together to graph our line, so we have 4x minus 12 minus 2y equals 12, which is, we just found the x and y-intercept, so we got 3, 0 for x-intercept and 0, -6 for our y-intercept. After I found those two, I can plot them. So I put a point at 3, 0, and I put a point at 0, -6. When I'm done and I have my 2 points, the last piece I need to do is draw the graph of my line. So draw a straight line through there. And I also need to remember that I should have arrows on both sides of those lines, because those lines will go on forever. Another way that we can graph is something called slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is always going to look like y equals mx plus b, where m is some number and b is some number. Okay, that m stands for the slope, which our definition of slope is rise over run, and we want it as a fraction so that we can see our rise over run. And then the second value that we have, b, is also a number. That's going to be your y-intercept. So again, remember, y-intercept is the point where we cross the y-axis. Looking at two examples in slope-intercept form, we'd see that our b value here is 2 and our slope is -3. Now I would write this as a fraction so I can see my rise over my run. So I have -3 over 1. For the second one, b is -8. Make sure you pay attention to that sign. And your slope is 3 over 5. So no need to change this because it's always already in rise 3, run 5. Let's do a couple examples, or actually to plot them first. You start with your y-intercept. That's your b value. We're going to put that on the y-axis somewhere. And then you use the second point to find your slope, which is your m value. And again, we need that to be as rise over run. And this, when we plot our second point, we start from b. So the first thing we do is go to b, and then from there we move. And finally, after we have those 2 points, we're going to connect them with a line, straight line, I should say. Going back to our example, we already said that we have b equals 2 and m equals -3. Remember, I wrote it as -3 over 1 so I could see my fraction. So b is 2. I put a point at y-intercept 2, or 0, 2. And then I have my slope of rise negative 3 over run 1, which means I'm coming down 3, because of the negative, down 3 and right 1. Go to B, and I come 1, 2, down 3, right 1, put my second point, and finally then I'm just going to draw the line that goes through those 2 points. Try to get fairly accurate, and the last thing, remember that we need arrows on both sides. Okay, so our special cases now, we're going to talk about horizontal lines, and those are lines that just move left to right. They are going to have no x-intercepts, and they'll always be of the form y equals b. Again, b is just some number. A couple examples of those, y equals 2 and y equals 0.5. So I'm going to do 2 different lines here on one graph. Normally you'll only be doing 1 line per graph. If I do y equals 2, I'm going to put a value at 2, my y-intercept, and then I'm going to draw a line that is horizontal, just going straight through 2. Okay, the important thing, remember arrows on the end, and it needs to be horizontal. Y equals 0.5 is in between 0 and 1, so I put a point in between 0 and 1, and then you also need to draw your line from left to right, again with arrows on both ends, because we're going on forever and ever. The other option then would be vertical lines, which are lines that only move up and down. They're going to have no y-intercepts, and they're always going to be the equation x equals b, which again is just some number. The difference here now is you'll see an x, so we have to go to our x-axis when we graph these instead of our y. So x equals 7, I go out to where x equals 7, I put a point, and then I'm going to have just a vertical line, just like that, down through that point, and arrows on the end. X is negative 5.5, so I go in between negative 5 and negative 6, put a point, and finally I am going to draw a line straight down through there, vertical line, remember, and arrows on both ends. Okay, so that is it for this lesson. So we've talked about graphing several different types of lines. Standard form, which was ax plus by equals c. You had to find your intercepts first. And then there was slope intercept form, which you used your intercept b, you plotted that point, and then you followed that up with your slope as rise over run, and you found a second point. And lastly, we did horizontal lines that only move left and right. They were going to be some y equals some number, or vertical lines that move only up or down. Those are going to be x equals some number. Okay, so the next couple of days we will spend a lot of time graphing lines, and then we'll move on from there, and we'll see you next session.